I have my difference of opinion with Dave Smith, but I thought he did a fantastic job on the Joe Rogan show with his debate against the quote unquote, we got to trust the expert, Joe. No, but the thing is, there's a lot of people that are just overly triggered by, I guess, how Dave Rubin, haha, Dave Smith was conducting himself. Now, he has said before he's a comedian. He's never said he's an expert, but look, Dave Smith, just like all of you, I'm pretty sure there are things that interest you, be it history, politics, gardening, mechanics, all that kind of stuff. Now, none of us are ever going to say we're experts in anything, but we could be knowledgeable and do what Jimmy Dore has said. Do your own research. But see, that triggers the establishment class, the expert ruling class, the knowledgeable people, because you should never challenge their authority, right? Because the experts never got anything wrong. The people who are professionals can never once screw up and have egg on their face. But I guess Dave Smith, and in my opinion, he won that debate against on Joe Rogan's show. But there are people who say, well, that's not fair. So on Piers Morgan's show, do you bloody well condemn ad hominem? Do you condemn homists? Decided to have Dave Smith and a few people, debate about the aftermath of the Rogan debate. So let's go ahead and pull up this video here. Shout out to everybody tuning in. And let's go ahead and just see somebody get easily triggered.
One camp, you tweeted, Dave Smith and Douglas Murray debated who qualifies as an expert and who should be making declarative statements about certain wars. That question answers itself. And that's been construed, John, to mean that you believe that Dave Smith was not the expert in the room. Explain why you felt that Dave Smith lost this debate.
Sure.
It's just interesting. It's like, I don't like you, Dave Smith. You hurt my feelings. You lost the debate. No, the internet said that Dave Smith won. Okay, there. I'm just throwing it out there.
I wouldn't say it had anything to do with Douglas. I would have to say it was the statements that Dave Smith made during the podcast, which highlight, and I won't get into the credentialism as Dave's quoting four-star generals or who's an expert, who's not. I do research. I think Dave tells jokes for a living. I had a problem with the statements he were made, and then how do you come to that conclusion, which really does get to the podcast.
I'm gonna stop pausing here because this guy starts becoming very insufferable. Okay, this guy is just upset that the expert class was called out and that people do agree that, yeah, the expert class can get things wrong. Also, I'm not a fan of, oh, you're a comedian, just stay in your lane. Say that to Lee Camp, say that to Jimmy Dore, because they've been hitting the nail on the head. They're comedians, and they've been proven right about a lot of stuff, as has Dave Smith. Now, I have my disagreements with Dave Smith. That's fine, but I'm not going to tell him stay in your lane. I'm not going to do that. But you want to know who will do that? People of high society will.
Podcaster world versus other individuals on how did you come to that opinion or that declarative statement, like Israel is intentionally killing civilians. I mean, there's like 10 different ways you can do research. You can do comparative, case study. And I think this is what Douglas was saying. If you haven't been there, then how are you getting to your conclusion? You ethnographic, you can go there and do interviews in Gaza, like both Douglas and I have done with soldiers. What's going on? How are you doing it? You can do even historical archival data research. That's not what it appears that Dave does. And it seems to be more of a historical revisionism. Take a piece of data that you got and then tell a really convincing narrative on how you got to your conclusion. But as somebody who has students, I mean, correlation is not causation is that famous phrase. When that story is actually just a lot of correlation and inferences, how did you get to your conclusion? How do you do that research? Forget the expertise and the credentialism. You're making a statement like it's true. And I know Dave's anti-war, and that's great, but you can't be anti-factual. And Dave, without Douglas, just made a bunch of not true statements.
Not true statements? Say it ain't so.
Civilians, especially children. That's not a factual statement at all, because it doesn't even include the base information. So it's almost like, you just don't know the information you need to know to make that judgment. And, you know, let's forget comparing it to a domestic situation like Dave continues to do on Joe Rogan, Lex Friedman, others. Like, if somebody killed my kids and I know where he's at and I go to that apartment building and I kill everybody in it, that's murder. And that's what Israel is doing. And that's not true. Even you.
So wait, when Gaza's been turned into a moonscape, I mean, at this point, what's left to destroy in Gaza? I mean, it's all gone. Everything: schools, hospitals, apartment buildings, houses, places of worship, not just only mosques, but churches too. Community centers, refugee centers, food, pantries. I mean, all of that gone. Gone. You know, what else do you call it? There's widespread disease. What do you call it? No, seriously, what do you call it?
Peers have commented about Israel striking something and saying, look at the number of civilians. That's not acceptable. That's not how war works. It's not even how you would assess that situation, because it completely rules out what the law of war says about proportionality, about assessing what is the target, who is that individual, what's his value, concrete value. And then, which a lot of people leave out, is what precautions did Israel take, like we just saw recently, of calling everybody in the building saying, look, the terrorist is using this building for a military purpose. You must leave. You must get out of this area, or all the other steps, these civilian harm mitigation measures. So that one's a really huge one, but there are other ones, like when Dave said that there are more children that have died in this war than any modern war. That's just, of course, Douglas called that out. But there is a whole list of them, from the blockade, from the...
Man, you like hearing yourself talk. Dave, listen, Dave. I think I paused at a perfect time where, like, Dave is like, oh, geez. Man, this guy just loves hearing himself talk.
Occupation, like all of these things were just counterfactual and not a logic that leads to a conclusion, but he's really convincing. And that's what I have a problem with.
All right, Dave, your response.
Thank God.
Sure. Well, okay. I mean, I do think that, like, you do a lot of this, as Douglas did, a lot of this poisoning of the well stuff and saying you tell jokes and I do research, and you could say this isn't credentialism all you want to, but it's really a lot before you start taking on an actual argument. In fact, it wasn't until the follow-up question that you pointed anything out. So to the analogy that I'm making, and as you were quoting me on Twitter the other day, I'm not saying that I'm not familiar, although I'm not claiming to have your level of expertise with international humanitarian law, or you can assert that war works a different way. I'm talking about something much more fundamental. What I'm saying is that Douglas is making the claim, and many others are, that Israel's killing of civilians is unintentional. And I'm talking about a very basic philosophical concept of morality, of intentionality, and that by what people mean when they say intentional, that if this was done domestically, we would consider it intentional. The point is that war, yes, look, there's been the Geneva Convention, there's international humanitarian law. It goes back to the mid-19th century, was codified into law after World War II. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a step in the right direction. But this is all a politician or a group of politicians declaring a word, and the fact that there are lines drawn on a map does not in any way magically transform morality or the basic philosophical concept of intent. And even in your example there, if I were to give out pamphlets, give out a warning, tell everybody I'd really like you to leave, and then they didn't, and I blew up a building, we would consider that intentional murder. Now, my point, I think a lot of times people object to almost what the implications of this way of looking at the world might be, but forget all of that for a second. I'm just talking about how human beings think about these things. And when you talk about an intentional killing, now, by the way, I should also stipulate that it's not as if that's the case in every single one of these strikes that Israel's taken. And we've gotten all types of evidence about this. And there's quite a number of cases, hundreds of cases, where they're waiting for terrorists to go back into a residential building and then attacking the building, suspected terrorists, I should say. But regardless, none of this is even really the point. The point is that on a very basic human level, and I would also think this is completely incompatible with Christianity, although I'm not trying to lecture anybody about that, but there is no micro and macro morality. There is no micro or macro intentionality. These are human concepts. And if you are dropping a bomb and you know that there are women and children on the receiving end of that bomb, then that was done intentionally. And I think this is the reality of war. And I think if we're going to have a conversation about this, we should deal with it in reality.
Now, I just want to pull this up here too, because look, this is just bigger than that. Because look, there's people still calling us out. Jewish Palestinian defenders hold Passover protests against ICE kidnappings and Gaza genocide, continuing the Jewish left's tradition of adapting the Passover Seder to promote liberation. Jewish Voice for Peace led protesters at a New York City rally demanding an end to the Trump administration targeting of Palestinian defenders for deportation and U.S. support of Israel's genocide war on Gaza. The JVP's Liberation Seder drew hundreds of rally goers, to Federal Plaza in Manhattan, where U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement New York headquarters are located. These are, again, all these organizers and people calling us out. Now, since President Donald Trump took office in January, ICE has been arresting foreign nationals, including people with permanent residency like Mahmoud Khalil and Mohsen Marwadi, who took part in nonviolent campus protests for Palestine. Protesters chanted slogans like "Free from Mahmoud," "Free them all," Come for one, face us all, held banners. Again, these are everyone that are people that are trying to step up and call an end to this. Now, look, Israel's U.S.-backed 557-day war on Gaza has left more than 180,000 Palestinians dead. You know, when the rubble is cleared, we're going to find more bodies. When they talk about turning Gaza, when you hear Trump talking about turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, its foundations will be built on bones and blood. That land will forever be seeping red. 180,000 dead, injured, or missing. Say that sentence again. Israel's U.S.-backed 557-day war on Gaza has left more than 180,000 Palestinians dead, injured, or missing. Israeli troops have forcibly displaced nearly all of the coastal enclave, more than 2 million inhabitants, as the far-right movement of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a fugitive from the International Criminal Court, prepares to permanently seize and recolonize large parts of the Strip. Widespread and sometimes deadly starvation and sickness have also ravaged Gaza as a result of Israel's complete siege. One of the policies under review by the International Court of Justice is an ongoing South African-led genocide case against Israel. Through it all, the Biden and now the Trump administration have given Israel unconditional support, including billions of dollars in armed aid and diplomatic cover. So when you hear Dave Smith saying, hey, you know, women and children getting bombed is wrong, and then you have an expert saying, no, it's not. Listen, Dave Smith, comedian, fine. But at least he could sniff through the BS, okay? Nobody's perfect. But yeah, he's how is anything that he has said wrong? I'll pull this back up here again.
Yeah, and also, John,
So,
I'll get you to respond to that. But I mean, it just seems to me, having done so many debates about this since October the 7th, I've never disputed that Israel had a right to defend itself. In fact, a duty to defend itself and its people from any further attacks of that magnitude, given how horrific it was. So let me just restate that again. But there's a kind of unique battlefield in Gaza. I would argue, and maybe you would argue differently, that you've got 2 million people, 50% of whom are under 18. And that the enemy are all living in civilian areas amongst the civilians. So you have a kind of horrific battleground, if you like, to attack if you're Israel, in the sense that you can only constantly kill a lot of civilians, including children, if you go after the enemy in those civilian areas. And that's exactly what's happened. And I can't think of a similar war, and maybe you can, you're more experienced at this, I accept, than I am, but can you think of another scenario where the proportion of children that is in the attack zone has been at 50% or higher, and therefore we're seeing so many children being killed?
So one,
And hold on, try not to punch your screen, okay? Because look, Pierce, listen, you should have just been paying attention to Bassem Youssef. You know, I think he did like what 3 interviews with you. Yeah, I mean one and done, tic tac toe, 3 in a row. You know, I mean, I think Bassem Youssef articulately has stated it perfectly about why this war in Gaza is an absolute complete disaster and failure of humanity across the board. But don't punch the screen when the expert begins talking again.
look, yeah, that's the case study or comparative model that you could do the research on. How does this compare to anything else? And it doesn't, right? The 20 years of preparing Gaza for war, the 400 miles of tunnels, the human sacrifice strategy, because both sides actually have legal obligations. And when Hamas says, I need the death of my women and children, that's not right. So the data about what is the population. So one, I don't want to be heartless about it. And every death of a child is terrible, but you're evaluating anybody who's below the 18 as a child, as in that Hamas has basically children. I joined the military at 17. Am I a child? And Hamas deploys. The average age of a Hamas recruit right now is 16 and a half. We've seen them put weapons in hands of very young children. You have combatant and you have non-combatant. Is there any comparable status to the demographic of Gaza? No. Is there any comparison to where another country, Egypt, refuses to let even those that want out from the combat areas? And
It's because there's treaties and arrangements to prevent that from happening. Okay? It's a bigger game than that. The Palestinian people, the people who live in Gaza, the Gazans, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They got nowhere to go. They're fish in a barrel, and they're being shot at.
Israel, who took weeks to evacuate the civilians from the areas they're going into. So absolutely, there are so many here. But back to Dave's comment, which it stands on itself, explaining what he doesn't know about war or the laws of war, about them being codified and when they went into effect. Or this is a simple question of morality that war should be no killing of civilians. That should be it. You two military should go find your place to fight and just have it out. That's not the history of war from the creation, literally, of city-states going out and everything.
Again, I think
you want to get into the frameworks to judge. No, the frameworks to judge war. We as societies, all the societies of war, the Geneva Conventions is one example, have decided here are the boundaries of brutality of war. Like, we don't bomb innocent civilians. And you cannot say, I don't care what your Haaretz articles say, you're not going to show me that Israel has targeted civilians, intentionally killing civilians, when I can show you measures that Israel has taken that no military in the history of war have taken.
Yes, we have TikTok, X, and Instagram showing bombings, artillery firing, tank shells, helicopter strikes, drone strikes, aerial strikes, shootings, sniper pop shots of men, women, children dying. Okay. Don't forget the World Central Kitchen Aid workers. Don't forget all those reporters and volunteers and first aid responders. Just throwing it out there.
To get civilians out of harm's way so they can target that terrorist. You once said on a podcast, if the terrorist is holding a baby and shooting at you, then of course you can kill the terrorist. And unfortunately, what they're doing is wrong. But then I understand that when we have cases of Hamas doing that, holding children so nobody will shoot at them, or going underneath a hospital, a school, a mosque, doing what we call lawfare. You have to have an understanding of the evolutions of the law of war, how it is adjudicated. When you say evidence, I mean evidence, not TikTok videos. I mean actual evidence of what did the person dropping.
Well, there are TikTok videos. Why do you think TikTok is put on the chopping block? Why do you think the establishment Democrats, especially under the Biden-Harris administration, want to put TikTok on the chopping block? Tick, 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 tock, 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 tock. Why do you think TikTok is now at risk? Why do you think so many people were in uproar about it? Because they were showing photos, videos, and doing commentary on what was happening in Gaza. Fun dance videos while shooting artillery or drone strikes.
The commander know? What did he do to prevent it? What time did he do it? What type of munition did he use? Dave's statement stand on his own of showing that he doesn't know the foundations of war. if it's what you call a just war, or just execution of the war, you're just not communicating that you know enough to make a statement like that. I'm just philosophically talking about killing civilians is wrong. That's what the law of war says. It says don't target civilians. Yeah. What Hamas did on October 7th. It doesn't say 0 civilians will die in a war. There's a precaution law of war. There is the feasible things you do to prevent the civilian death. But you can't say Israel hasn't done that. And I'm saying, based on my research, not an appeal to expertise, going there, interviewing IDF soldiers, commanders, Netanyahu himself, I'm saying Israel is not targeting or intentionally trying to kill civilians. They're doing the opposite.
Yes, I know. Doing the opposite. Yeah, the opposite. Doing the opposite. So I want to get Dave Smith's response.
To fight. And so they show up under the lights and you get into the cage and I put my hands up and then the other guy puts his hands down and starts telling me what a better fighter he is than me. And you're like, okay, well then let's do it. Like, I don't know. Let's have the conversation. Like, instead of all this time just telling me you're an expert. Hold on. Wait, 1 second. Let me finish my point since you had some time to talk there. Look, all of this stuff about like whether you have to be there. By the way, it's going viral online, but there's this great clip of Douglas Murray taking apart the lived experience argument from the left and making all these points about how people who were never in the Holocaust have written much more beautifully and accurate about the Holocaust than people who actually went through it themselves. If you want to say that you gain if you want to say you have expertise, or you want to say going there gives you some more expertise, then sure. I mean, I wouldn't argue that. No one's arguing that you can't learn about a place from going there. But again, this is the fighter putting his hands down and going, I've trained so much harder than you. I'm such a better boxer than you. You could never hang with me. It's like, okay, so let's get it going. Anyway, in terms of, by the way, there is absolutely no chance, and I haven't examined Douglas Murray's passport, but there's no chance that he's not a hypocrite on this issue. I guarantee he has not been to all of the places that he's commented on. I don't know. He's commented on every foreign country and what's going on geopolitically for 20 years. I'm sure he hasn't visited all of those places. Back to the point, because it seems like in these things we do everything except actually debate the issue. You missed my entire point. Once you're appealing to the law or appealing to how warfare actually works, you're missing the entire point that I was making. My point is that this is not how the law works, and this is not how war actually works. I'm making a much more basic human point, a fundamental point. Look, Pierce, the other day, okay, this is, and by the way, if you don't want to believe this story, it's fine. It's just one firsthand account from Gaza. But whether it's true or not, and there's no reason to suspect it's not true, but whether it's true or not, there's just been hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of examples like this. But so there was a woman, a building collapsed. She says, as she's walking down the building, she can hear the little kids, not 16-year-old members of Hamas. You're talking 4- and 5-year-olds screaming for their mothers while they're buried underneath the rubble, screaming for help from their mommy. And you know what, Pierce? No help is coming because there's no bulldozers in Gaza. Nobody's coming to get those kids out. This is the reality of war. And this is what this is the main point that I was trying to make to Douglas Murray, which he kept running away from. If you're going to say that our goal here is to degrade Hamas, Murray conceded you probably can't eliminate them, but he feels like you can degrade them. If you're going to degrade Hamas and the cost of it is those little children dying under rubble, screaming for their mother as their bones are crushed and no one's coming to help them, then fine. But at least say that you find that price acceptable. And then we could have a real conversation about why people are going to view you as a monster and why the other side will never stop fighting and will always be against you. Because I could tell you for sure, if that was my kids, and I know, Pierce, if those were your kids as well, you wouldn't want to hear anything about how, well, we've codified in international law that this is the norm of the way wars are allowed to be fought versus not allowed to be fought. I'm making a very human point that this is the reality of war. And you can say under international humanitarian law, it's not considered intentional. We would consider this an intentional act in any other area. That's the point. It's a very basic human point that if anyone were to do this domestically and then tried to use the defense of like, no, but I dropped a leaflet. No, I didn't really want to kill them. I just wanted to kill them. We'd go, I don't care. You blew up a building knowing there were kids in there. That's the essence of this whole thing. And there's no amount, like, there's no amount of expertise that can really get you away from this basic fundamental moral logic.
Now, I want to stop right there. I think that's a good note to end it on. Well, we're not done yet because there's two other things. There was another person who wanted to weigh in and comment on Dave Smith's debate on Douglas Murray on Joe Rogan's podcast. Look, what have I said about the beginning of October 7th? That this war, all what it's going to do is lay down the foundations for the next war. Dave Smith, he's not wrong. I mean, if that was your kids, I mean, look at all of the bloodshed, 557 days of unending war, bombings, drone strikes, helicopter strikes, etc., etc., etc. There's all sorts of videos on social media, if they haven't been taken down yet already, but everybody's already seen it. Everybody knows. Everybody now knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. Everybody knows. And now that everybody knows, I think a lot of people are getting sick of it. I mean, and since the aftermath of October 7th, what else have we seen with this war in Gaza? We're seeing military strikes happening in Lebanon, political and economic and social instability in Syria with ongoing conflicts, potential war with Iran, God forbid, Yemen and the Houthis. I mean, this is now a war that is encompassing a good portion of the Middle East, from the Arabian Peninsula in Yemen all the way to Iran, and to the neighboring countries of Syria and Lebanon, and not to mention the displacements that's happening in the West Bank. This is madness. How would you feel if this was you? If this was you. And the experts want to say, oh, well, Dave Smith or anybody else shouldn't comment on it. Well, I mean, pretty soon, sooner or later, I think more people are wondering, hey, isn't there or is there not a ceasefire? Is there not like going to be peace? Like, what is prolonging this? What is going on? How long has this been going on? And this history that we are seeing play out before us, written in blood, is going to cost future generations. Now, the Trump administration in 2024, they made the campaign promise to end the wars. I don't know if that's going to happen. Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe possibility. Who knows? I'll let you decide. But there's a couple other things here I want to pull up here because, it has to deal with, Eric Weinstein gives his take on Dave Smith's appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, opposite to Douglas Murray, of course. Let's go and pull this up here.
Eric, what did you make of the debate with Dave and Douglas?
I don't think it was a debate. I don't think that's what happened. My guess, and again, I haven't talked to Joe about this, and if I had talked to Joe about it, I couldn't say because I don't transmit private conversations. But if I had to make a guess, Douglas was trying to do something normal, which is that as an author, he was calling on a friend to say, hey, I have a new book and I'd like to be talking about it to generate some interest. And my guess is that because the book involved Israel and because Joe was open at the beginning of this program and saying that he found barbarism in Israel's actions, my guess is that Joe was probably very comfortable with Douglas and very uncomfortable with the book. And my belief is that he called in Dave because Dave, whether he's an expert or not, I will say he has a tremendous number of facts that go against the Israeli narrative, and that whether or not he's considered to be, a self-credentialed scholar, I haven't really looked at Dave's work enough to know. I would say that what Joe was doing was to say, I want to make sure that Douglas is balanced because I, Joe, believe that barbarism is being defended, and I'm not comfortable with that. But because we don't have the backstory to it, we don't really realize what happened in the first opening moments of the exchange, which was very, very strange.
I also want to pull this up here too.
War is war, and whatever Israel, that is the government's intention, I can assure you that when you put that many kids with guns into their first shooting war, bad stuff is going to happen at some level. We always talk about, what is the normal amount of friendly fire accidents? Nobody wants it. is there any civilian that's being targeted? I have no doubt that in every war, somebody with a gun does the wrong thing, or who targets improperly because they're pissed off. I don't know. That's not my issue. What I can tell you is the war is completely not portrayed accurately. And I just went to a clip that I recorded with Konstantin Kisin on October 14th. So 7 days after and before Israel went into Gaza. And what I said was, this is Munchausen by proxy. Sinwar is the mother. He's desperately trying to get his women and children killed. This is not human shields, by the way. This is an innovation that I would call not human shields, but subterranean crosshair strategy, where you put your military tunnels underneath mosques, orphanages, schools, etc. Because the key in hybrid warfare is video. And video is much more powerful than the kinetic war. So Israel's winning the kinetic war, losing the hybrid war. Sinwar is still controlling it from his grave. And the only tell of this is that you still hold hostages in Gaza, Hamas does, and you're getting people to give a victory chant from the river to the sea, celebrating a genocide that has yet to happen. The whole purpose is to keep the world supplied with video, because none of us have the stomach. I can hear that Dave doesn't. I don't either, for watching war video. Because in part, Western Europe and North America has been at peace since 1945.
1940, but we've been involved in so many military actions. Vietnam, wait, first of all, the Korean War, Vietnam, and everything else afterwards, including the also fantastic War on Terror, war in Afghanistan, war in Iraq. Yes, maybe the mainland's been at peace, but like ancient Rome, we're everywhere.
We've lost the ability to watch war.
Oh no, I don't think we've lost the ability. I think we're able to watch war. I think we are, and we have been able to continue to watch war. Now, what do I mean by this? Because everyone's saying, well, wait, kid. I mean, I can't stand looking at these imagery. No, none of us can, but we see the imagery being shared over social media. I mean, it's there in front of us. It's almost like a horrific tale from The Outer Limits or The Twilight Zone or even Black Mirror. You have a populace watching terror, destruction, and madness, the ending of lives, the comfort at your own phone. Whether you're waiting at a bus stop to go to work, you're in the break room, or you're in your bed, or sitting on a couch. You'll be doom scrolling, and all of a sudden you'll see the video. We're able to watch it, and everyone's able to post it. Everyone's able to see it. And the thing is, the issue is, I think you have a populace that just doesn't know how to say stop. The anti-war movement has been effectively co-opted by the Democratic establishment. I don't expect the Republican establishment to be any kind of peacenik party, because they're never going to do that. We're able to watch war, and we just don't know what to say. People can say that this is terrible, but until people actually get out in the streets and start demanding ceasefire, start demanding the end of war, start demanding that endless billions of dollars go to funding these ridiculous wars, one day soon, someday, God forbid, but this happens to all empires, we're going to get a knock at the door, and the peace in our land will be upended. We want to say that we're going to be safe forever, but the thing is, there's no such thing of it. All what these wars are doing is laying down the foundations for the next big one. The one that's going to really shake everything up. And the thing about war is that no one wins. It leads to more suffering. Dave Smith's debate on Joe Rogan's show. In my opinion, just mine alone, everyone can add in their own 2 cents. I believe he won because he was getting down to the point of, this is madness. If this was your family, you'd be upset too, and it needs to stop. Simple as that. To quote Donald Trump himself at that CNN town hall with Caitlin Collins, I want people to stop dying. I think that's pretty much what Dave Smith is saying. I want people to stop dying. I think we all want people to stop dying. But so much has been lost. So much has been destroyed. I don't think that's going to happen. And so, We have to explain our actions to future generations. Why didn't you stop this?